egalitarian theme of the day, so hence the circle. And I'm happy to see that the circle is as large as it is. So, yeah, that's great. I want to thank Matt Rothschild for reaching out to Crawford Stewardship Project. It was his idea. He wanted to come out here and have an event, and he's got a whole range of issues that he and the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign are working on, and the interface of the political issues we're dealing with today and science and democracy are something that is very near and dear to Crawford Stewardship Project's mission, and really appreciate all the watchdogging that Wisconsin Democracy Campaign does, especially on the financial front. They do amazing work keeping tabs on who gets money from who and who's spending lots of money and time on lobbying, and so I really recommend their resources that they provide on that. And, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Matt.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
Well, I do want to thank everybody for coming. I'm gratified at the size of the crowd, and
it's a hotbed out here.
Yeah, well, it's good. It's good to know. I like getting outside of Madison. I think it's important to do that. And everywhere I go, I meet good people like you who are really committed to preserving our environment and to safeguarding our democracy. And those are real crucial issues right now. I want to thank Forrest and Meg for getting me here and arranging this event. It's great to see Terry Tesklin, an old colleague of mine from the Progressive, who's came in here from Richland Center. It's been a long time since I've seen Terry. I wish it was a little better weather driving out and driving home later, I guess, but I was able to see a bunch of sandhill cranes and red-tailed hawks. People who know me know that I'm a bird watcher and have been for 55 years now. So, and I love coming out to this part of Wisconsin bird watching. Wyalusing State Park is a treasure for warblers, prothonotary warblers and cerulean warblers especially, and then my wife and I would come out to Prairie du Chien and McGregor and see the hawk migration, and so it's a beautiful part of the state for that, and I am grateful that you all are trying to protect the environment here. I know it's disgusting to me and must be to you that there's frac sand mining just a couple miles from Wyalusing State Park, and all the frac sand mining that's going on here in Crawford and all across the state, and the high-capacity wells and the factory farms that are destroying our state, and maybe some mining too. There's a big mining hearing today in the Capitol. It's an interesting time because of some of the alliances that are being developed on our side. I saw that Trout Unlimited was there today against the mining bill. I see that Trout Unlimited is opposing a couple bills that would destroy up to 1 million acres of wetlands. Trout Unlimited is not the most left-wing group there is, and it's important to make these alliances where we can.
They've even signed on to the statewide push for a CAFO moratorium,
Right.
which was, yeah.
So I think it's alliances like that will enable us to stop this runaway train, or the walk-air wrecking crew, as I like to call it, because basically we've been under a counter-revolution here the last 6 years. They are turning back the clock, not only from the Jim Doyle era, but they want to put Fighting Bob LaFollette's bust outside of the Capitol and put it in mothballs. And I'm not really kidding you. There was something on Right Wisconsin, this right-wing website, earlier this month or a couple of weeks ago, where they said, let's take that down. And Paul Ryan himself has called progressivism a cancer. And so this is a very calculated assault on the finest tradition, in my opinion, of Wisconsin politics, Fighting Bob LaFollette's tradition of progressivism. And it's an assault because they're trying to get rid of anything that stands in the way of corporate profiteering. There are only a couple things that do that. And one is labor unions, and they managed to really take a whack out of labor unions. And the other thing is government regulation. If you can demonize government regulation or destroy it, then there's nothing that stands in the way of a corporation making absolutely as much profit as possible, regardless of the damage it does to the environment, damage it inflicts on consumers or its employees. So that kind of philosophically is what we've been dealing with here. And the ideology behind it, the mask behind it, is this idea that everything public is bad and everything private is good. It's about as crude as it gets. But that's what it is. They're not even paying for our state parks anymore. And so, to them, they worship the idol of private property and corporate profits. And so that's what we're facing now in this state, and it's embarrassing to note that leading Wisconsin export these days is reactionary politics. That the model that Scott Walker imposed on the state of Wisconsin, the bomb that he dropped in his own words on the state of Wisconsin in 2011, is a bomb that he has been bragging about and exporting to other states. He went to Iowa, when Iowa in November, last November, became totally Republican. He said, you guys gotta move fast, don't worry about any protests. I withstood the protest, I'm unintimidated, all that line. And just go fast. So what they did in Iowa, upon Scott Walker's urging, was they took the increase in the minimum wage that had passed in cities like Ames and Iowa City and Des Moines, up to $10 an hour, and they knocked it back to $7.25. So there actually was a wage cut in Iowa, courtesy of Scott Walker's encouragement. So that's kind of big picture what we're looking at as far as Wisconsin goes. But I want to get into kind of the attack on science here in Wisconsin, and then talk about Trump a little bit, because Walker's exported to Trump too. And he advised Rance Priebus and their buddy, and when Rance Priebus was chief of staff, he said, just go fast, do everything fast, take it all. And that's what they're trying to do. As Bernie Sanders used to say, they want everything. They're not content with what they got, they want absolutely everything, and they're grabbing it as fast as they possibly can, at tremendous cost to our democracy and to our environment and possibly to the planet. So those are kind of the dire stakes that we're facing right now. And to me, the attack on science is, it's kind of a mask for what they're trying to accomplish. But I do think when I'm pessimistic, and I'm not constitutionally pessimistic, but I think we're entering into the dusk of the age of enlightenment. The idea of enlightenment values, of truth, of scientific method, of verifying things, of fact, and letting go of superstition or bias or things like that. Those enlightenment values are kind of being scuffed up and disparaged or discarded and viewed as not that important. And of course, it's true, Orwell said this, and other people have said this, that when people encounter a fact that interferes with their value system, rather than change their value system, they discount the fact and turn the fact away. And so we need to talk to people in ways not just on facts. I was at a speaking, I think at the Crawford County Democratic Party picnic recently, in the summer, and there was a bumper sticker that said, "Facts matter." And while I liked where that was coming from, I'm not sure that's the most persuasive bumper sticker in the world, because for a lot of people, the facts aren't the most important thing. Speaking to people about their values and what they cherish most about how they identify with the United States, or how they identify with their community, or with their friends, or with the people they worship with, are more important to them than, beating people over the head with facts. So that's a messaging issue, but that's not my main point today. I mean, my main point is, we're kind of almost at pre-Scopes trial America right now. We're going back to, where, Darwin is suspect, and facts and basic science are suspect. I was at a hearing in the Capitol, and my mom would roll over in her grave if she knew that I was a paid lobbyist now, but I'm a paid lobbyist for the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign, so I go to the Capitol a lot. And I was at a hearing when Jesse Kramer said that the Earth is just 6,000 years old, and he's a representative. He's a representative of the state of Wisconsin, and it was just kind of startling. The issue was the free speech code for the University of Wisconsin, and part of that bill said that people who are employed by the state of Wisconsin should not weigh in on public policy issues. So my representative in Madison, bless her heart, Therese Berceau, said, well, what if you're a biologist at the University of Wisconsin and you're teaching Darwinism? Are you taking a stand on public issues? And is it okay if you corrected a student who said the earth is just 6,000 years old? And he said, well, the earth is 6,000 years old. So, that's kind of what we're dealing with as far as know-nothingism on science. And then politically, I was shocked to see one day when I went into the Capitol, I was testifying on something called the Article 5 Amend the Constitution route, which we don't need to get into here. I think it's a bad idea to go that route. But there was a Representative Schra, Republican, on the panel, who said the only reason he had questions about the Article 5 idea was because the John Birch Society also had questions about it. I mean, basically, he was saying he takes his orders from the John Birch Society. And for me, as a Jewish American, that horrified me. And because the John Birch Society is a racist and anti-Semitic group that I thought was virtually extinct in about 1965. But it rang a bell in my ear, excuse me, because I've become friends with Dale Schultz. You guys know Dale Schultz. Over the last couple years. And I went to Dale's farm in Richland Center, in the outskirts, and at his home in Richland Center, and he told me, when I go to Republican gatherings, you wouldn't believe the disgusting literature that's on the tables. And he said, the Republican Party's been taken over by Birchers and Dixiecrats. And so, I thought, wow, that must be a hyperbole. That's got to be an exaggeration. But, here we have an elected official in the Capitol, in the public, on Wisconsin High probably, saying, I'm listening to the John Birch folks here, because that's who I take my advice from. Well, that's a bizarre place to be in the year 2017. But that's where we are. I want to talk a little bit about Walker and his anti-science-ism. A lot of that starts with his climate denial. In 2015, Walker's spokesman said, Governor Walker believes facts have shown that there has not been any measurable warning in the last 15 or 20 years. I mean, this is just to say, black is white and 2 + 2 is 5. It's clear he doesn't care about facts. He doesn't care about fossil fuel pollution if he can say something like that. And so he's fired scientists from the DNR, or Kathy Stepp did, but I'm sure she was following orders. And they scrubbed the DNR website of any mention of climate change. He curbed incentives for wind power. He didn't go for the high-speed train. There was a proposal this summer or spring to tax the heavy trucks, sometimes the trucks doing the frac sand transport, but the heavy trucks that are on our highways, paved for our highways, which are 49th in the country, put a tax on the trucks that do the most damage. Trucks do enormous amounts of damage compared to cars. So what did they do? Did they do that? No, they didn't tax the trucks. They're taxing Priuses now and electric vehicles. That's their idea, which is, it's insane. I thought it was a joke when I read it the first time, but now it's the law of the state. And that's pretty amazing.
Well, not only trucks around in rural areas, it's the also implements of husbandry, as they call the massive farm implements that take up multiple lanes of traffic. And those also are not getting additional fees levied on them.
I mean, there are more reasonable ways to fix our roads than tax the people who are driving Priuses that don't really damage the roads very much. As a former Prius owner, I can say that. They don't care about the damage of high-capacity wells. I hate the term high-capacity wells, by the way, because I don't think it even gets close to describing exactly what a high-capacity well is. The high-capacity wells, as I'm sure you probably know, they suck up, at a minimum, 100,000 gallons of fresh water from the groundwater every single day. 100,000 gallons, sometimes 500,000 gallons a day. And this is draining our trout streams. That's one reason why Trout Unlimited is against them, because some of their great trout streams are evaporating. And people who have cottages on lakefronts, or whose families for generations have had cottages on the lakefront, that cottage is no longer on the lakefront in a lot of these lakes. Those lakes have receded. Those lakes are drying up. They're the pier is 100 yards now from where the water was. And so, for the companies it's great, but for you know, the owners of those little family cottages, it's no fun. For the trout fishermen, it's no fun. And if the water gets contaminated, it's no fun for the people who can't drink the water. And that's true here in Wisconsin, in a lot of places. In Kewaunee County, 1 out of 3 people can't drink from their faucet because of the pollution from the big dairy farms. So we got real problems here protecting our basic treasures. I mean, Wisconsin, it's just a shame. I mean, I'm from the Chicago area, but I used to look at Wisconsin. Well, Wisconsin's great. They got clean government. They really protect their environment. We don't have clean government anymore here, and we don't protect our environment here anymore. So I think that's why a lot of us are wanting to do something to try to, you know, try to stop this runaway train and get back at least to where we were, and then go forward from there. And it's going to be a process. It's going to take some time. It's not going to happen in the next year or two. You know, I'm thinking it's a 10-year process here. And I was speaking at our annual meeting in the spring, and the median age at the meeting was 93. And one of the people in the audience came up to me and said, you know, you're making me cry when you say we're, you know, 10 or 15 years out, because I'm not going to be here in 10 or 15 years. But, and I appreciate that. I mean, I'm a cancer survivor. I had lymphoma 6 years ago and had radiation, chemotherapy, and I'm fine. But that's a shot across the bow, and you know, I may not be here in 10 or 15 years either. But I just think it's important for us to recognize the stakes and what we need to get to where we want to be, and to think that, oh my God, if we elect somebody in 2018 as governor, which may or may not happen, that things are going to change overnight. It's just not the way it's going to happen. And so, you know, and we can talk in the question period about, you know, what needs to be done practically. I have some ideas. I don't have all the answers. If I did, I'd be doing something else. Be waving a magic wand around or something. But I do want to talk about Foxconn just for a second. You know, they gave this company, first of all, it's crazy economic development planning, and it's also debunks what they've been telling us for years and years and years, that there's no money. There's no money for our public schools, there's no money to clean up the environment, there's no money to fix our roads. All of a sudden, you know, the first company from Taiwan that knocks on the door gets $3 billion. And so that's kind of crazy, and there was no thought about, wow, if we do have this $3 billion that appeared out of nowhere, you know, here's a range of things we could do with $3 billion, excuse me, to help our economy and to boost jobs in Wisconsin. But that discussion never took place. It was just, here's $3 billion and you can have the whole store besides. And part of the whole store was the environment. And they're letting Foxconn not only violate our environmental regulations, they're letting Foxconn change the course of streams. They can change the way the streams flow around their property. I mean, that is just astonishing. And again, this is not democracy. This is oligarchy. This is corporations running the country and running the state. And you know, Walker kind of was upfront about that. You know, open for business, though I think that's a misnomer. I think it should be open for bribery or open for boondoggles. But that's, you know, that's what he's done. He's turned, you know, the treasury of the Wisconsin government into a ATM for his corporate cronies and for his donors. You know, if they give him $10,000, he gives them a loan of $500,000 or whatever it is, and that's how things work in Madison these days. So it's a real problem. And not just the DNR policies show a disregard for science. I also think, you know, they passed some laws that are terrible for public health, and anyone who has a scientific background would understand that. My wife's a retired pediatric nurse practitioner who practiced for 40 years, and she was appalled when she heard that they passed laws in the last 5 years that allowed an increase in the amount of lead in paint. Now, lead in paint for children who are exposed to lead paint is disastrous for their brain development and their physiological development. But, you know, there they have it. They also made it very difficult for people who've been exposed to asbestos to sue the asbestos companies. And the people in Wisconsin, people across the country actually, who are most exposed to asbestos are service members. or veterans who were exposed when they were in the service. Actually, they're exposed to asbestos poisoning at a rate at 5 times the civilian rate. And so Walker and this crowd, they say they really respect our service members and are grateful for their service, but when those service members want to get justice in court for their health problems, those doors to the courthouse are pretty much locked right now. And so that's, it's just another anti-science, anti-person policy that's come down the pike. And I want to say that even their school voucher policy is an anti-science policy. They, of course, have been draining the public education system of its funds by funneling so much money into the private and parochial schools. But what gets taught in those private and parochial schools? You know, they're being taught creationism, they're being taught things that are just scientifically false, and they're using our tax dollars to do it. And so I think, you know, that's another kind of subtle assault on science that we are seeing here. But now I want to make the comparison between Walker and Trump. They're not the same person, and I'm grateful that Walker isn't as pathological in some ways as Trump is. I mean, Trump is going to be in the DSM-6, the Diagnostic Manual for Psychiatric Disorders. There's been 5 volumes already. The DSM-5 is the one that's out there. If you're health people, you know this better than I do. But my wife taught me all this stuff. But anyway, in the DSM-6, there's going to be a picture of Donald Trump next to narcissistic personality disorder, because he shows every sign of being a clinical narcissist, which is he has no empathy, he bullies, he has an exaggerated sense of himself. He always has to say he's the best, and we saw that with his, you know, cage match with his IQ wrestling with the Secretary of State. I mean, it's just, I mean, it is kind of funny. I mean, he's all id, you know. He's a 5-year-old, but he's a 5-year-old with, you know, nuclear weapons as toys. So, but yeah, that personality is pathological. I mean, Walker has maybe other personality quirks. But he's not quite there. I mean, he's not in that narcissistic place. There's nothing there, if you look into Walker's eyes, really, that you can see, which is kind of scary, but it's a different kind of personality issue, I think. But Trump has aped a lot of what Walker has done here in Wisconsin. I mean, Trump is a climate change denier. He said it's a total and very expensive hoax. It's a hoax from China. This was a real echo. Like Walker, Trump had the EPA scrub its website of references to climate change. And, you know, like Walker, he appointed an anti-environment person to head the EPA. Walker had Kathy Stepp, and now Trump has Scott Pruitt, who's
and Kathy Stepp.
What?
And Kathy Stepp.
And
He's
Kathy
moved
Stepp,
up to the
yeah.
EPA now.
Kathy Lockstep, I call her.
Oh, that's a good one. I like that.
He's and he shelved Obama's Clean Power Plan. He's getting out of the Paris Accords. He's stacked the upper reaches of the EPA with people like Kathy Stepp, but also people who work with Senator Inhofe, who's this senator. He's the guy, you'll remember, who brought the snowball into the Capitol one cold day in Washington to prove that there's no such thing as global warming, because there's snow in Washington, D.C. I mean, that's the level of scientific sophistication that goes on there. So it's not a pretty picture there. And then in one of the leaflets, I handed out an essay that, what's his name, from Chile? Ariel Dorfman printed in the New York Review of Books today. You can find it if you go home and Google Ariel Dorfman, D-O-R-F-M-A-N, on just the subject that I was supposed to be speaking on today, which is Trump's attack on science. And it's a great article, and he talks about Trump trying to defund the National Institutes of Health and the National Science Foundation and other research institutions. I mean, facts really are kind of immaterial to him. And I was thinking about that as I was driving over. I was listening on Democracy Now! To Amy Goodman today interviewing Robert J. Lifton, who is the great psychiatrist and author of an incredible book called The Nazi Doctors. I read that in college. And he has a book coming out, or articles coming out about the pathology of Trump, and it's important for psychiatrists and psychologists to talk about that. But he also talked about Trump's, just total non-interest in facts. It's all just
Who
about.
is this? Not Ariel Dorfman?
No, so this is Robert J. Lifton. Lifton, L-I-F-T-O-N. He also wrote a book about nuclear weapons. He wrote a book about Vietnam veterans too, about the Vietnam War. Really interesting man. But as Ariel Dorfman says in that article, Trump's assault on science is going to kill people. He says millions of people. And it's going to kill people because of more workplace deaths, because there are cuts to the National Institute on Occupational Safety and Health, NIOSH. More deaths, obviously, from global warming. And then there's the risk of nuclear war. It is crazy that there's open discussion of waging nuclear war in the year 2017. Terry Teslin will remember our old friends Irwin Knoll, who was the former editor of The Progressive, and Sam Day, who was the former managing editor there, who worked at Nukewatch, and Bonnie Erfer and John LaForge are still working at Nukewatch. And they spent their whole adult lives trying to make the case for getting rid of nuclear weapons. And I remember Sam Day telling me a year before he died that if we don't get rid of these nuclear weapons, at some point, someone's going to use them. And then maybe we'll get rid of nuclear weapons, but it'll be upon the corpses of millions and millions of people. And so that quote has just been banging around in my head ever since this North Korea nuclear saber rattling has been going on. And I do hope that cooler heads prevail, but we're taught in 7th grade, and we're taught in high school social studies class, and maybe even in college still, that there's this great system of checks and balances here in the United States. I don't think it's so great. It doesn't make me feel secure. It doesn't make me feel secure, especially on this issue of nuclear war. Fortunately, there's an effort underway in the Congress right now to at least introduce a bill, if not pass a bill, that would say, unless the United States is attacked, Donald Trump can't wage nuclear war. Certainly the Constitution doesn't allow him to, because Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution says only Congress has the power to declare war. But that hasn't stopped any president since 1945 from waging war whenever they want, and then it's become kind of an article of faith in the nuclear age that there's no time to have Congress declare war if, the Soviets at the time, or now the Russians, which still have 2,000 nuclear missiles aimed at the United States, were attacking us. So we got to give the president all this power. But I think that is certainly no way for a democracy to function. Remember, the founder said, James Madison said, to let a president declare war on his own is just too much temptation for one man. And it is too much temptation. I mean, what if he has a bad night's sleep? Instead of tweeting at 5 o'clock in the morning, he's going to say, let's go launch a nuclear weapon. Who knows? I mean, there's got to be something between, this impetuous president's impulses and the destruction of the world. I mean, it would be nice if we could get these nuclear weapons off here, trigger alert. And by that, I mean, the U.S. and Russia have weapons that can be launched within 15 minutes. And it'd be nice, at least, if the President of the United States would, maybe want to sleep on it. So I think there are things that we need to do as a democracy to try to make that happen. But I'm really worried about our democracy generally, because here we have a president who is not only psychologically totally unfit for the office, but he has been kind of systematically attacking institutions of our democracy. I mean, when the President of the United States attacks the judiciary, the third estate, and calls them so-called judges, or makes fun of one of the appellate courts, or when he attacks the media as the enemy of the people, or when he says, as he does this week, that he thinks it's disgusting that people can write whatever they want in the United States of America. I mean, has he read the First Amendment? Does he care about that? Obviously he doesn't. And, he even suggested that the FCC should go take the NBC's license away. That is to go at real fundamental institutions of our democracy. And, there are some people who defend it. Fox News defends it almost all the time. Representative Lamar Smith of Texas said on the House floor, "Better to get your news directly from the president. In fact, it might be the only way to get the unvarnished truth." You know what committee this guy's chairman of, Lamar Smith? The House Committee on Science, Space and Technology. Isn't that great? That's what every dictator wants. Every dictator wants to be the only source of information for the people that the dictator rules. But if the president is the only source, or the only source that